Welcome everybody. Boy, are we excited for today's webinar. We got video today. Excited to jump in today's conversation, but before we do, we want to let everyone get in, get situated, get comfortable. So we're going to play a quick video.
So my name is Dan Murdoch. I'm the Director of Marketing and Sales Development for WorkMarket. And WorkMarket is a freelance management system, so we're a software as a service company. How can you put an investment into your sales development organization while not doubling the size of the team from an operational capital perspective? And so with the investment in InsideSales.com, I'm enabled to essentially double the size of my team, in some cases triple the size of my team in productivity and sales activity, with making 800% less of the investment. So automating all the processes of logging calls, researching. I wanted to take the thinking element completely out of sales development's hands. I wanted to empower myself to be able to point them in the proper direction, while also giving them the ability to just worry about executing. And so if we're talking about that from a pipeline perspective and we're looking at the overall funnel, it's a 358% increase in productivity and sales activity, whether that be calls and or emails. The qualified appointments have in turn increased by 300%. And if you go down the rest of the funnel, opportunity creation is up by 500%, and so we'll close won deals. And so obviously exciting numbers for us. So ultimately, if we have 5 people or 500 people, we have the type of technology that allows us to scale and to build. InsideSales.com is revolutionizing the way people at least engage, obviously from an outbound and inbound perspective, around prospecting and ultimately generating pipeline value that no other company could ever be synonymous with or be able to recreate.
Okay, great. Now that video is complete, let's dive in. So today's conversation, we're going to be talking about dialing and email strategies, focused mostly on following up. I think this conversation has some real meat in different areas. So let's get in, but before we do, maybe we'll just introduce myself and Thomas Haymore here. So Thomas, why don't we start with you, then we'll flip back to me.
So my name's Thomas Haymore. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Inside Sales and Gabe's sidekick, trying to help extract all the wisdom Gabe has about how to do the best strategies for your company, but also trying to explain how Inside Sales fits into the market and what you should be looking for your sales acceleration technologies.
Yeah, I think Thomas brings a lot. He's been doing product marketing here at InsideSales.com for now
2 years.
It just hit his 2-year mark. We've had some great stuff. So that's Thomas. I'm Gabe. I run what we call Inside Sales Labs. I run our research and best practice group, and always fun to talk about the latest and greatest in the sales acceleration space. And so with that, we got a couple topics we wanted to debate and discuss here, but I want to dive right in with the sales stack. Let's start big picture. And we want to be thinking about, and maybe we can just go back and forth here, Thomas.
Right.
I mean, sales stack, it's a buzzword. It's something we all talk about, we hear about. As a product marketer, and then I want to see if I can add to this, how should people be thinking about a sales technology stack, and what is included and what's not included?
Well, one of the problems you run into in the technology world is sometimes you look at the technology and you let that determine what you need, rather than thinking, okay, what are the problems we're trying to solve? So the sales technology stack, you got to think, what are the problems you're trying to solve, right? Communication is a huge one.
Right.
You want to also be tracking engagement. You also want to manage the leads, from usually when marketing's handing them off to sales all the way to conversion and close. You also want to be able to manage your pipeline and other key sales activities.
Yeah.
If you're running an integrated sales team, you might also want help with your forecast. If you're running just an SDR team, then you might care a lot more about the lead management. But you want to start with, okay, what does my sales team actually do?
Yeah.
But those categories right there, communication, including email, engagement tracking, lead management, pipeline management, forecasting if necessary, and something to help motivate your sales teams. Those are kind of the key components. But I want to ask you a question that I think hopefully gets to the real big pain point.
Yeah.
It's not just optimal. If you had to pick just 1 or 2 of those, what is the critical part of the sales stack?
Yeah.
What is not just the icing, what is the cake?
I think you hit it on the head with, I think people too often do jump to the technology. Yeah. I think you do need to understand, I'm a big process guy, right? I've mapped hundreds of processes. I do think you've got to say, hey, let's map our entire sales process, find the weaknesses, and then start plugging in technology. And I love the idea of thinking about it in personas. A field rep is not going to need the same technology as a sales development rep. A sales engineer isn't going to need the same as another role. Marketing's not going to need the same. So if you can start to first identify your process, then start to think about personas, I think you're in a better place to start thinking about what is the optimal component, what is your optimal technology stack. So that's probably at a high level.
Yeah, I like the persona part because I think sometimes we get confused in the industry. There's a lot of terms, SDR, ISR, AE, but at the base you're saying, like what you've done is you got to just examine who are my sales people, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And not just borrow a template that might be common practice somewhere, but it's not your practice.
Yeah, and if you take that one step further, okay, so you think about your sales process and marketing, sales, closing deals, customer support, et cetera. Most people start at the beginning. So they're going to attack their marketing stack first. They get that nailed down. Then the next logical place is that sales development. It's your prospecting arm. Why do most people focus there to begin the sales technology stack? Is because that's often it's got the most granular processes. Some stuff can be automated. It's a little more of an understanding of what people do. Man, the further you move down the funnel, I think it gets a little less structured. It gets a little. You get into those areas that are a little grayer. So most companies start at the top in the prospecting stack, and we see that in our space, right? I mean, a lot of development, a lot of investment in that top of funnel kind of prospecting area. Okay, so very top of level, I think you get process. I think you figure out your roles. I think you start at that first role, that sales development, that prospecting role. And then within that, you hit a couple key concepts. You got to be able to understand top to bottom in your prospecting what you need. Okay, well, how do I get accounts? Where do I get stuff? How do I prioritize that stuff? How do I reach out to that stuff? How do I qualify that stuff? How do I pass off that stuff? How do I stay motivated throughout the entire process with incentives or money? Out of all of those things, I believe the comm stack is where you do want to go.
Communications.
Yeah, because I do, and certainly it fits into our webinar, because one of the reasons we wanted to do this was because when you think of that communication stack, it becomes the crux of being able to, I mean, God, I can get leads all day. I can be motivated all day. If I'm not talking, if I'm not doing it with my people, if I'm not getting in touch with them, then we're just not seeing the sales results. So I like to start people on starting with that prospecting and then focusing immediately on the communication stack.
Well, like you said, it's solving the key problem, right? It's not looking at the technology and saying, how do I have a solution, how do I go find a problem for the solution? It's saying the core function of sales is connecting what you've got as a company and to the prospects, and that requires communication. So you said dialer and emailing. But I think this leads to like one of the hot questions we get, and something that we've talked about and you've talked about at length. We talk about a dialer, but isn't cold calling dead? Isn't that what you hear now? So do you need a dialer? Because if cold calling is dead,
I mean, is cold calling dead? I need to write an article on that because, man, I think it's got a lot of juice. People still think it's a fascinating topic. Now, cold calling is dead in the way in which it's often defined. You can't just reach out to someone and say, not doing any research, not doing anything.
Hey, I'm Gabe, and I'd like to tell you about
me. Because you don't know about them, so you have to talk about you, right?
So exactly.
I do think that is true, but the phone is not dead.
Okay.
And I think those two things become often intertwined, and people do get a little confused. Oh, cold calling is dead. We basically shouldn't use the phone. I still believe that the phone I don't care if you're an enterprise, transactional, strategic, selling, you've got to be able to pick up the phone and use it and sell effectively. So you got to make sure both of those are dead. So is cold calling dead? Cold calling by going in cold is dead. Calling is not dead.
Okay. So what's the right strategy then? So if the days of yore are gone of I've got 10,000 phone numbers with a name and that's all I know. Now I know more about them. Maybe it's a social media profile. Maybe it's a marketing automation has given me some information on touches. How does dialing now fit into the optimal follow-up strategy like we've been talking about today?
Yeah.
How does calling fit into that?
Right. So calling can't be your go-to play. I think, there's some analogy or some word that, balance in all things.
Yes.
What's that? There's some sort of analogy or something out there.
They're probably moderation in all things.
Moderation,
That's
something like that. I think maybe I was thinking of that. So the same applies to cadence. It applies to food, but it also applies to cadence.
Does it apply to your sports center habit, though?
Yeah,
That's what I really
my
wanna know.
wife, tell my wife. But in all seriousness, you can't be just a social seller. You can't just be an emailer. I was with a company out in Boston, and one of the sales leaders said, my team has turned into email marketers.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. I don't think you should be pounding the phone probably and doing 500 phone calls a day like you're in a call center. That's probably also not the right way to go. So the concept of dialing and calling is trying to moderate, find the balance, an appropriate strategy that uses each of them. And the word comes down to test. You've got to find a methodology, and that's the word cadence, and I want to get into that in a minute. But dialing has got to fit into your overall cadence strategy, and it should probably include, I consider a core cadence to have 4 common elements, right? Calling, voicemail, email, and social, right? So that's going to be your foundational cadence. As you move upstream, as you move into more strategic or relational sale, you've got to add that 5th element, and that's direct mailing. So we're dropping coffee cards, we're dropping pizza, we're doing footballs.
We've done that.
That's the account-based model, right? That needs to then embed itself into an optimal cadence. So you have those 5 pillars. There you go. You got those 5 pillars in the cadence, but phone calls got to fit in there.
So, one of the things I hear in terms of what you're saying about how this fits in is every time a new technology or a new communication medium arrives on the scene, there's always these predictions of, X is going to replace Y.
Yeah.
The radio's going to replace television, telephone's going to replace mail, email's going to replace phone calls, we're all going to telecommute to work. And what we've seen from a market perspective, aside from just process, is that these all just get added onto each other. Even the fax. In some industries and some markets, that's still the way to go, right? And so what I hear you saying is not just about what's the process for your company, but understanding that each new medium doesn't replace other ones. It just complements them in different ways.
I think you need to approach that more. I mean, I think some people have jumped too far on the social selling bandwagon, and we end up wasting a lot of time on social outlets. So I think if you can get that and embed it, it becomes important. So this kind of gets a little back to your role. Phone calls are important. As companies think about technology for dialing, what are some of the key functionalities you should or shouldn't have
That's a great question.
in a dialing technology?
So I'm trying to think back to when this really first came on the market, and there's a history here that goes all the way back to PBX and integrated phone systems, honestly, where some of the first technology startups got their big heyday back in the 80s and 90s. And so there's a bit of this legacy of telephony is still complicated. It's still difficult. Doing especially if you're an enterprise-sized company, having an integrated telephony system is still tough. But the telephony systems that got built for enterprises kind of went the way of IT of we need to serve everybody. Sales has slightly different needs. So I think that a couple of the things that sales need in their dialer, one is they needed to be integrated with their CRM, whatever their system of record is.
I got to interrupt because I think that is an interesting concept, right? And I don't want to finish. I want you to finish your point.
No problem.
I always interrupt. This is who I am.
It is.
I would have forgot the idea, though. I wanted to hit this because you
mentioned
you mentioned a lot of companies. I mean, they have to have a phone system.
Yes.
And a phone system is slightly different than a sales enablement dialing solution. And how would you coach a company to think, or it just needs to be thought of differently? I guess that's the message.
Yeah, so I mean, I think of it as like I think about email. A lot of people use email for project management, right? And it's like, that can work. It's not the best tool. Email is more of an infrastructure. Email is a protocol that lets you exchange messages. It's very robust. Telephony is a little bit like that, right? Telephony is the infrastructure that lets you communicate, but it isn't going to help your sales team.
It doesn't actually enable.
Yeah, you need something that takes your sales team and helps them act. And so one of the things.
So just using my own current phone system is not. That's not an enablement.
It's not a sales tool. It's not a sales tool.
It's table
It's a
stakes.
communication tool, right? It's not saving you time. And part of this, right, is if everyone else, if you got all the salespeople in the world together to agree that you would just use regular phones, then maybe you'd be fine. But everyone's looking for an advantage, right? And so if you're punching out each number individually, you're going to lose.
Losing that advantage.
You're right.
Thank you for indulging me in
no
that.
Problem.
But I want to get back to some of these core functionalities. So as we think about some of the functionalities that people should have in this sales enablement tool, that is around dialing?
Right.
What are they looking for? Now, you mentioned CRM or the connection.
Right. So one of the biggest things we found with this sort of latest wave of technology, and Inside Sales was a pioneer here, is making sure it's integrated with the CRM. A lot of this is time saving, but
simple but huge, right?
It's not just time saving. If it's not integrated with the CRM, reps just won't enter it. You think of it as, oh, I'm going to save lots of time. But if you don't have it automatically integrated, you'll never get that data. Because some reps just will never do it. So you need a system that automatically logs the calls and lets you track that. Lets you track efficiency, and you also get to know which of your reps are doing the most or their job. Another is, back to time saving, things like one-click dialing, click-to-call. You already have all that phone information in the CRM. You don't need reps tapping that out again. You need them to go into the record, click dial, and it's already set up for them. You mentioned voicemails earlier. You know, it's easy to think to yourself, I'm just going to leave a voicemail. But if you, especially if you're on a sales development team and you're trying to make, say, 80 dials a day, and you want to have a connect rate that says, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 8, that's a lot of voicemails you're going to be leaving. And if you're leaving 45 seconds to leave the voicemail and reconnect and everything, you just lost a lot of time out of your day. So if you have something that can pre-record voicemails, then when you connect, you drop the voicemail.
Could be pretty powerful.
And you move on. Others such as part of a cadence, like you mentioned, you want, to the extent possible, and again, different systems are complex in different ways, you want the extent possible for reps to understand what they're doing with the call. So some systems, Inside Sales uses this as well, uses a cue card perhaps. So when the dial is going to be made, it reminds the rep, oh, okay, this is the third call in your cadence. Here's what you're supposed to accomplish in this call. And so it's not just, I'm dialing again, I'm dialing again. We at Inside Sales use something called also agent client leg, which other systems might also use. What that lets us do is it lets us separate the feedback or the information from your rep and the feedback from the customer. So they're on almost two separate lines. We get to capture both separately. So what this lets us do is the sales rep can be talking to the client, and the sales manager can listen in, can whisper to the sales rep.
I was just going to ask about recording or monitoring.
Exactly.
I mean, those become a part of the dialing solution, right?
Because again, what you don't, telephony can connect point A to point B. What you need is a sales dialer that lets you act more efficiently and lets you be more effective. And part of that is being able to review what reps have done, like recording the calls. Part of that is compliance as well. You want to record those calls. But again, part of it is to make sure you're not losing that data. Like in today's world, it's not enough to, at the end of the quarter, say, well, here's what happened.
We didn't hit our numbers. We don't know anything.
You need to be able
happens a lot to you guys.
You need to be able to say,
"No, you're in product." Never mind. That was going to be a good joke, but that doesn't even apply to him.
Like I'm in product marketing. I tell stories. No, so
it's a good point, though. I mean, so you get a lot of insight. You want to make sure that connects. I want to throw out the predictive concept.
Right.
I mean, AI is something, I'm obviously looking at a lot, how that works with best practices, but from a product standpoint, does dialing an AI is there anything to that? And if so, what is that?
So artificial intelligence, right? It's kind of a big buzzword right now. So
it is. Right?
I mean, look, you need all the artificial intelligence you can get, right? But I mean, any sales rep really needs all the help. So artificial intelligence, like what are we saying, right? It's kind of a broad term. Sometimes we mean something predictive.
Right.
Sometimes we mean, oh, this person's going to answer the phone when you call. But sometimes it's actually very simple as, hey, let's figure out, let's sort of list appropriately. You know, I think AI is best thought of in terms of it's both time saving and effectiveness tools, right? So for instance, it might be AI that helps you identify the email address of a prospect, you know, and that's not like super heavy science. It's not like black magic, right? But it is helping you understand how to reach your prospect. It might also be something that understands, this system that you're using, your CRM, has all this data on your prospects and knows that a VP of whatever position is a better buyer than a VP of another position, and helps you make those. The reason a dialer is so critical, there was two reasons. One is, without a dialer, you're not capturing any of that information.
Sure.
The AI doesn't do you any good if you don't have information on who you've called, how long it lasted, what happened, and who was on the other side of the line. Dialers capture that for you. Yeah. The other is that you need a dialer so you can feed those AI insights to the reps. So the reps are very focused. They're in it to hit their numbers, get their commissions, be successful, move on to bigger accounts, and they're moving fast. They don't like to sit there and think a dozen different ways to attack something because they know that activity leads to closed deals.
Sure.
So you need a dialer that says, hey, do this now.
Okay.
And again, that comes in lots of shapes and sizes. I'm not sure there's a one-size-fits-all. Inside Sales tries to design its system flexible enough. True AI should be flexible enough that it can take your sales data and divine and derive insights from it and deliver it to the sales rep.
Yeah.
But again, back to your point about process, this needs to be, you don't want it to just be some analytics firm that just says, hey, here's the optimal buyer profile. That's helpful. What you need is something that really kind of gathers all that data and then delivers sort of prescriptions directly to the reps.
So it can, I mean, AI can absolutely be a big play.
Absolutely.
In any
because you think about AI, it's adding on to what you already do. Think about with Google, right? Years ago, Google started personalizing everyone's search results, right? And no one really noticed because it just seemed like Google got a lot smarter.
Right.
But all it really did was take your data and instead of saying, what does everybody in, say, North America want when they search sports car? They think, okay, what is Gabe Larson? Gabe Larson probably means a Subaru, right? When he searches sports car. They can make these predictions.
That's right.
And that's what we want AI with sales, is it to be somewhat seamless.
Well, if you could take the concept of dialing and you could say, let's identify the optimal profile,
Yes.
right? And you could take some of these best practices, right? So if I'm a certain profile, more phone calls or less phone calls are the optimal time to call. All of a sudden, that's like Netflixing my sales motion, right? It's recommending to me some different things that are going to be probably more appropriate than others.
And just like Netflix, right? Like Netflix sometimes
is that a verb, Netflixing?
It is now.
I just
it is
made
now.
that up.
You are now an etymologist, a sociologist.
Netflixing, I like that.
Just like with Netflix, right? Netflix knows you better than you know yourself, which
Honestly.
can be embarrassing, right? Because with my family, it's like my kids get access to a Netflix account, you log on, and you're like, well, these are some stunningly interesting cartoons. Because Netflix doesn't care. Netflix does not care about the artistic appeal of what's in your library. Netflix cares about hours spent on that platform.
Isn't that funny? Seriously, I ended up watching this show called Leap Year last night on Netflix.
Oh, yeah? Isn't that a...
like chick flick?
Yeah,
with,
romantic comedy,
Amy Adam.
It knew. Or it knew that your wife
But
wanted to watch
you
it.
just nailed it. I mean,
Yeah.
we popped that open, and I'm just like, I'm going to watch this.
I'm gonna do this. Well, it should get to the point, right? Where
But I love the idea in sales, right? It's like, rather than sitting down and being forced or sitting down, I mean, it's like, this is probably the way we should be contacting this person or the time and place.
Well, Netflix doesn't. Netflix isn't. It may be in the future, but it isn't so arrogant to say this is the show you're going to watch next.
Yeah,
you're going to watch this right now. It says
it doesn't force.
Here's a couple of categories, and here's the top picks for each of those categories, and that's the key about artificial intelligence.
It supports. It doesn't.
Supports.
What's the line? It supports. It doesn't force. Or
Yeah,
something
it complements.
Like
It doesn't replace.
There you go.
And so I think the point is, you have a bunch of business process and intelligence in your business already. AI should do the things that machines are good at. Machines are good at processing data and prioritizing.
Sure.
Humans are good at understanding business priorities.
Reasoning.
So if you just had a big conference, like we just had a big customer conference, as the business owner to prioritize leads coming out of that conference.
Right.
AI can partner on top of that and say, okay, of those leads, which ones should you get
And
first?
maybe how to approach them or
Yeah.
times and optimal things like that. Let's shift gears briefly. So that's a little bit on phone calls, some best practice around it, some dialing technology that you think about. Let's shift over to email, as that's kind of another fundamental part of this communication stack where we started. And I want to get into the technology first, but let's see if we can't hit some best practices. And it's a question for both of us around, is emailing still something that is, if we reach that tipping point where emailing is not dead, but is it as not useful as it once was?
I think email is funny, right? Because email goes both ways. You have people in the industry who say email is dead.
Yeah.
They say it's not effective.
Well, because of what are some of the stats out there? The average person is receiving a couple hundred emails a day.
Yeah, well,
right?
we all get this, right? And I mean, if you're one of the hundreds of millions of people on Gmail, a lot of those emails go straight to your non-primary inbox, right? They go straight to social or straight to promotions. Google just calls it out. It's like, hey, this is a sales
decided.
email.
I mean, Google in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, and so, but at the same time, it's like it can be such a like a trap, right? Because
Right.
email seems like it's easy, you can automate it, and you can send out hundreds of emails. But there's downsides to that, right? Because if you start to send out too many emails, you can get marked as a spammer.
Right.
Those emails are less effective. And then again, the point with sales, what's the difference between marketing and sales, right? Marketing, we've sort of fallen into the trap of marketing is advertising.
Yeah.
But that's not what marketing is. Marketing is called marketing because it's about creating a market.
Yeah.
Marketing is supposed to be
I
educational.
love the word. I love educate. I mean, we've got to get to a place of education.
It's one to many. Sales is different. The reason you have sales is you have one-to-one. And so sales needs to use email for that one-to-one.
Yeah.
A marketing email should sort of engage the market, but a sales email should engage an individual.
So do you like the idea of salespeople? I mean, it's certainly become a little bit of a trend. I mean, salespeople playing marketers, sending out blast emails to 30, 40 people. I mean, do you feel like that's something that can be used effectively?
Well, I think it goes back to your point of process. You know, I think anyone would hesitate to say this is the absolute line. It's like dials.
Yeah.
If you'd say cold calling isn't dead, but if you tried to say here's the absolute right number of calls a day, you'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Because that only works for that specific company. I think what is wrong is, like you said with dialing, making a cadence that's only dialing,
Yeah.
making a cadence that's only email. And that's not what sales is for. That's
Yeah.
an email marketing team's job. So I think the question back to you is, what have you seen? How does emailing and dialing work together?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in your thousands of deployments that you've done,
Millions.
basically.
Let's say
Millions at
millions.
this point.
No, I mean, email, goodness. I mean, I consider cadence to be a sequence of activities
Yes.
that, really boost contact and qualification rates. Which means when you think about contact rates, you're going to have a better chance of contacting somebody if you actually reach out to them fairly often.
Yes.
So this idea of one phone call or one email is not going to do that. That's why I
Yeah.
get bothered when I see people doing a blast to 30 people and seeing who responds and then following up with them.
Yes.
Because it's kind of just a spray and pray model.
Yeah.
But that's why I love when you think about cadence, it's not just about contacting, it is about helping to qualify. And qualifying comes back to education.
Yes.
So if I'm going to use email, I got to start to think about a campaign, almost like a marketer. Put your marketing hat on just for a minute and think of a 3 or 4, and most studies are going to say 3 to 6 emails in a good cadence. But those emails should be, and maybe you blast out. I am open to the concept of blasting out 10, 20 at a time and hitting a group of people, but then having that encompassed in an overall strategy.
Yes.
That says, we're going to focus on, solving this problem. I'm going to hit them with a case study, a relevant, top challenge, and then I'm going to hit with another. And I get these kind of streaming concept that educates them over the sales process. I also think, when it comes to a good cadence, content is king.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when we talk about emails and phone calls, they talk about the number. And I do that often because I do think it's important, but we got to take a step back and say, if you have one great email, you don't need to, if you have really good content, you may not have to email them or call them 10 times. So don't forget about the content.
Yes.
And certainly there's best practice out there. And I'm not going to sit up here and say, you got to have, 44 characters in your subject, use emojis, make sure you use personalization.
I like the star one.
I think they're all interesting
caps.
strategies. All interesting strategies. I've seen different ones work. When it comes to email, the beauty of it is testing.
Yeah.
You've got to test what works for you. Sometimes it's better to start with, hi John or hey John, or the subject line. Subject, that opens the email. You got to start there. You got to be strong with it. And there's some best practice, but you got to be able to test them. But without technology,
You can test them.
as a salesperson, I can't test it.
Right.
And that's where I feel like sales and marketing, where a salesperson, you mentioned the one-to-one, I've got to take some of the marketing principles. I don't want to just be this blaster of emails.
Right.
But marketing's ability or their thought process on, I'm not just going to send a random email and then send another random email.
Yes.
I'm going to send an email with a purpose, and I'm going to watch open rates and downloads and things like that. And if that lands well with a certain type of audience, then I'm going to do more of that. I think we got to take that hat on, but it's not possible without technology. So I want to flip it and say, as we think about email, we've got some best practices. what are some of the functionalities of an email enablement tool that are a must-have as we think about sales specifically?
Right.
Again, I love that idea of breaking sales and marketing.
Right.
Sales specifically, what functionalities do I need?
Well, I think there's a similar framework to talking about telephony. Telephony is the infrastructure, but it's
Okay.
not necessarily a system of action. So what marketing automation?
I love your idea, right? I mean, I use email in the IT department as a communication.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Just because you have a Microsoft Exchange server doesn't mean you have the ability to give your sales team the tools they need.
Yeah.
It's the infrastructure. So I think it
love
goes
that.
back to, as well, system of action. What are you trying to accomplish with the sales team? They're trying to have these conversations, right? So, but also you need these time-saving tools. So part of it is at this point, almost prosaic. You have email template management. This might include the different controls and permissions. So if you have a brand new sales rep,
Email template.
Yeah.
It's kind of most
huge.
people have it now,
Yeah, but
right?
it's-
it is messy and it's unorganized.
but some people
right?
don't, right? And so
That's fair.
Some
That's
people are using Gmail, and a
lot.
and
Well, and a lot of people are using. I was at a client not long ago, and they had Outlook.
Lotus Notes, please.
So, that does ring a bell. I may have come across one client that did that, but no, someone was on Outlook and they were using signatures as their templates.
Oh, that's pretty clever, actually. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean,
It's not very efficient. But,
they were like, yeah, see, I have these different.
Yeah.
I'm like, those are signatures. He's like, no, these are my.
but
these are
that's
my
that's
templates.
the exact point, right? It's
So you're right. Some people don't.
Right.
The basics are the.
But it's
the
like leaving
template management.
voicemails. There's thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of sales reps who are making 50 plus calls a day, maybe 80 plus.
Yeah.
And every time they leave a voicemail, hey, this is John from da 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 da, and they have to leave it. By the end of the day, what's that voicemail sound like? This is John.
I've listened to some funny
And that voicemail's not going to
ones.
do you any good.
4:59.
If I have to make one more call.
So you've got
template
templates as
management.
being an important part.
Right. And then back to that integration with CRM. Email is different, in that, just like with recording of a sales call, you not necessarily want the whole sales call recording to be in CRM. That could clog up your CRM, but you want it accessed somewhere. So you may not want every byte of that email into your CRM, but what you want is, did they send it? You want to see, because you want to be able to see that cadence. Are my sales reps calling and emailing when they should?
Yeah.
You also need that engagement tracking. You need to be able to say, did someone open it?
Yeah.
Did they respond to it? Hopefully, if you use a more sophisticated system like Inside Sales, you can see, did they forward it internally?
Yeah.
That's a really good indicator that there's interest in your proposal.
a need,
Did
interest,
they
etc.
download an attachment?
Right.
Did they go to your website? And then back to the predictive, you'd also like a little bit of help on email send times. Now, if you're using a
Yeah.
marketing automation one-to-many,
Fair.
it's like a batch process. But with sales, it's more of a one-to-one process, and you want to be able to say,
Optimize around.
just send when they're going to open it. For a lot of people, that's going to be early in the morning.
That's a great add-on for AI.
Yeah, first in your inbox. And then you also want some automation. Gabe alluded to this. Email is different than voice in that, maybe in the future, computers can do all the qualifying conversations,
Yeah.
That would be great for salespeople. I think they'd love.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but, well, let's
But
not go too far down that
email
path.
can be automated more. You have merge fields,
Yeah.
and you can send it out, and you want to be able to schedule it in the future. You
like
want to
that
be able to
idea. I
say,
like that.
again, that's time saving, but it's
Well, you
also
can
more,
schedule, but also there's some prediction around,
yeah.
basically.
And you
optimal
need it to
times.
be a little bit more flexible. Again, you don't want it. This is sales. This is not marketing. You don't want to be sending an email when you're calling at the same time. So you want a little more fine-grained control.
Yeah.
You put the sales rep in the cockpit so they can say, "I called today." So when it's fresh in my mind, I'm going to schedule an email to go out 2 days from now. They don't have to worry about it. They know it'll go through, and they know they're not going to trip over their own feet.
So I don't have to do it. The system kind
Yeah.
of does it for me. But I still play I create the
Right,
content.
but the engagement tracking is very nice too, because if you're trying to qualify someone or close somebody, you get a notification that they just opened your attachment.
Yeah.
They're engaged. That might be the right time to reach out.
Well, this is a big debate, because the concept of email enablement is, it's spread, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely one of the tools that I think a lot of people have. So a lot of the questions are, okay, so I'm getting some of this information
Right.
around opens, downloads, etc.
Mm-hmm.
What is actionable and what's not actionable?
Mm-hmm.
Should I follow up when someone forwards? Should I do something if
Yeah.
someone downloads? Should I do something if someone opens? I had one company who did this. They basically tied a lot of their marketing send into any time an email got opened,
Okay.
they shoved it into a queue for some of their sales development reps
Okay.
to follow up on that. Results were way more effective. This may scare some people, but I know a lot of times people say, you know what, if someone opens an email, that's not a trigger event for someone to follow up with a call.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah.
And I think as you move further down the aggression, as you get to downloads and forwards and click-throughs, I mean, sales reps got to take what they can.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you call the person up and you say, hey, you know, I saw you open my email. That's not what I'm saying, but
That
you've
can
got
be a
to
little
look.
aggressive.
We talk about trigger events all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, if someone moves jobs, but if someone opens an email and you can get that, I don't think that's a bad thing to test out,
Right.
rather than shy away from it. I think people have gotten a little too far on the, oh my goodness, don't do that, don't call because they opened it. It's like, test it out.
Yeah, test it out.
Yeah, see if it works.
Well, and I think it depends too on your business model. So especially if you're in, say, mid-market to enterprise,
Fair.
You the sales rep should be the champion and the partner of the internal champion.
Yeah.
And you should be attached at the hip.
Yeah.
And if you get an email notification and you call up your internal champion, you should have a good relationship.
Sure.
When you're more transactional sales, you may not have the time.
Yeah.
To even, I got an email notification, let me call him.
All these times,
So again,
right.
back to testing, and like you said, as you get further down the funnel, it's a little bit more art. It's not just science.
Right.
And the tools should be designed to augment the sales rep, not replace them.
Yeah.
And that's why the email notifications, again, in marketing, it's much more trigger focused,
Right.
automated events. In sales, it's much more about informing the sales rep and guiding them so they can make their own
What
choices.
happens? I like that. So as we wrap it up here, obviously we talked dialing, we've talked email, we've talked a little bit of best practice and technology on each. I'd love to hear your opinion on the future. And I'm pulling a quick one on you.
Yeah.
Thinking, you know, a couple of years down the road, 5,
Yeah.
10, you know, let's go dialing and then let's go
Right.
emailing. Where do we go? Where do we go from here? Is it is
Yeah.
the concept, is that where it goes? It
Yeah.
just goes further predictive, or does it go? Do we eliminate phone? You know,
Yeah.
phone, a lot of people said voicemail's dead. Is phone actually going to be dead?
It's going to be all Snapchat.
Is it we're going to be communicating via Snapchat? Oh, I was afraid of that. My wife and I have been doing that a lot.
I think you know it's.
What is? Yeah, I mean, just your quick thoughts.
Look, when I try to say, oh, here's what the market's going to do, I try to look at analogs. I look what happened with marketing automation.
Sure.
And one of my former bosses in marketing at a previous company, he was a designer by trade, so he used to do a lot of magazine ads. And he used to say, the good old days when the only judge of whether you're a successful marketer was if the buyer liked the ad.
Yeah.
Because there was no other way to judge if it were effective.
Yeah.
So you might buy an ad in a magazine, and you would buy that ad based on the magazine circulation.
Right.
But the design agency and the marketing agency that placed the ad, who knows? I mean, you know, you put something in the Wall Street Journal, and it's going to 2 million people are going to see it, and you have no idea if it's effective. Sales used to be that way. Even 10 years ago, when inside sales hadn't, both the company and the industry hadn't totally taken
Right.
over, it was more like those weekly meetings with the sales manager was like the only thing you knew. The only thing you had to gauge whether you're going to hit your quota.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, let's look what happened in marketing. Marketing from the early 2000s till now got very scientific. And it's not that all marketing has, like brand marketing is still very informed by the art and creativity of brand marketers, but it's also measured on the effectiveness of demand gen campaigns. So I think with sales will be something similar. I think that dialers and especially companies that offer basic telephony infrastructure, I think these dialing functions will just become standard.
Yeah.
You won't be able to buy a dialer that doesn't have the integrated sync to CRM and all that. But more than that, I think what you'll find are a couple of things. One is I think you'll find better integrations from marketing to sales.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's data. And what inside sales does with that is it tries to make sure that the CRM has all the data for marketing and inside sales, so you can make those, you can have all the data in the same place. And then I think you'll find better AI guidance. What I think you'll find is much more of, here are the leads and prospects or opportunities that you should focus on. Sure. And then I think finally, this is a bit out on a limb. I think you will find a lot more what we call natural language processing. I think as the industry advances, you'll see more help with, hey, is this email written correctly? You know, are you saying the right things? That's it's a ways down the way. But I think that's what AI promises, is the ability to take all of that data from the way your email templates are formulated to the way you sound on the phone and guide the sales rep. But I think you're right. I don't see the future in, even in a generation of, Siri or Alexa or whatever, Cortana, making the phone calls for you.
Yeah.
There's something about the immediacy of human-to-human contact, even if it's just voice. I think we continue to see more and more of the data entry, prioritization, data processing be handled by machines, so that the human can look at what the machine is offering them, information on the prospect, make the call now, this is a good time to call, and help them close that deal.
I like it. Well, with that, we'll kind of bring this to an end.
Well, thanks, Gabe. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's also been a pleasure on my side. So
let's do Netflix sometime.
Yeah, that's right.
Leap year.
Yeah,
right.
I would recommend it. It was highly recommended. Great show. So with that, everybody, really appreciate you joining today's webinar on email and dialing best practices, follow-up strategies. Some great downloads for you here. You'll be able to access, and we certainly want to take some Q&A.
Absolutely.
And so we'll be live here for a couple minutes, being able to answer any questions or comments you have.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to our conversation with Gabe and myself. This is Thomas Haymore. I'm the Director of Product Marketing. I was the less good-looking one of the two of us. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, Gabe, had to rush off to a family vacation in Hawaii. So he is currently winning today versus the rest of us. But he deserves a break after putting a lot of effort last week into our customer conference. I just wanted to recap again, what we're trying to accomplish here is just try to understand the nuances and the purpose of having these follow-up strategies. But also right now what I want to do is see if you have any questions that we can address, anything to follow up. Don't want to put any pressure on you if you're feeling like you can't come up with something right away. My email is pretty simple. It's thomas.haymore@insidesales.com. You can also find me on Twitter at tchaymore. So I have a couple of questions here, and one of the first ones is about account-based sales. So many of you may not do account-based sales. Many of you may have a mix of transactional account-based, but account-based sales is a pretty hot topic right now. And typically when we talk about account-based sales, what we're talking about is larger transactions that require you to work with multiple contacts in an account. So the typical example is an enterprise account where you might be selling to the head of marketing, but you're also going to need to talk to directors of marketing, get somebody in sales to sign off, get someone in the CFO's organization to sign off, and also work with IT. Different than selling a $5 or $10 license to a single user. You're trying to sell probably a larger license deal to a whole account. This is where it gets trickier if you're used to using technology stack for SDRs, where there's a lot of heavy emphasis on number of dials and number of emails. Switching to account-based sales requires a little bit more art than science. And so what you need to do is have these flexible follow-up cadences, and we saw some of the content that's available from Inside Sales. With account-based sales, it's just really critical for you to produce with the sales managers the right cadence with the right personas. So and as you're building that cadence, if you're using something like Inside Sales Platform and the dialer or a new product called Playbooks, you probably need to build separate plans of attack for the different personas. So it's not just call the company on day 1 and day 3, email on day 5. It's having separate cadences for each of those personas. So it's like, okay, first you're going to get the head of marketing on the phone, and that's one cadence. And then after you have the head of marketing interested, you need to have a plan of attack for getting the sales or IT or the CFO also engaged. So there are a lot of products out there that purport to help with account-based sales. And really the trick is that it's still a bit of an art. And so you have to be flexible with your own sales team. If it's too restrictive, they just won't use it, and they'll go back to sort of the old methods of, I'm going to follow my gut and I'm going to kind of work this system, outside of technology. Account-based sales is also where opportunity management comes in handy. So as you get further down the funnel, it's less about how many dials and email templates, and it's more about, is this opportunity at risk and is it going to close in this quarter? With our opportunity management product inside sales called HD Forecast, what we try to do is highlight which opportunities are at risk, which opportunities are likely to close, and then identify risk factors, and that helps the sales manager and the sales rep to identify how to follow up. So to sum that up, it's a bit more nuanced. It takes a lot more art, and it takes a lot more hands-on engagement with the rep and the manager. But if you don't have a dialing system or an emailing system, you have no visibility into what your reps are doing, even with an account. So you still need to have that system in place so you can track your reps' activities. Another great question on rep compliance. So if anyone has ever been part of a software rollout before, you know that often it's not software problems, it's human problems. People often don't like to change their habits, and no matter how bad the previous software was, people have sort of all adapted to it, and you need to get them to change their behavior. So Gabe and I talked a bit about AI, and that the point of AI is to deliver recommendations and prescriptive actions directly to the end user. That really helps with compliance. What you don't want to do is add more steps to a rep's day with the promise that it'll make them more effective. And so compliance will be easier if you're making the rep's life easier. So you need a system that makes dialing faster, that makes emailing easier, voicemails easier. If the system you have does that, you'll get higher compliance. If the system you have requires more data entry, if it requires research or looking at a spreadsheet with maybe a close score, you're going to get less compliance because people want software to save them time. And if you have software that saves them time, generally you're going to have good compliance rates. Another great question, following up on Gabe and I talking about SDRs versus the AEs, and someone just asking generally, what's the big difference in how software, what do these two people do, these personas, and what the software is like? So again, every business is different. One of the points that Gabe, I think, makes a lot, and he's done a ton of on-the-ground analyses, is every company is different. You need to really do what we call an SVA, or it's also called a blueprint, or also just a strategic analysis or business process, is understand what is your process, because in the marketing for sales, we have these ideal types of, there's an SDR, there's an AE, but the reality is that everyone's a little bit different. So if you have a sales rep who's mostly doing transactional work, then you want a system that prioritizes high number of dials, high number of emails, and makes that as easy as possible for them, like the inside sales power dialer. If you have a rep who's going to be responsible for a lot of their own prospecting and might manage opportunities as well, then you'd be looking more at something like inside sales playbooks, which gives you a little bit more flexibility and doesn't start from the premise of your rep is going to want to work through as many leads as possible. But the point is, don't start with the software. Start with the problem you're trying to solve, and then see how that software can solve those problems. All right, looks like we have a final question about how does inside sales combine emailing and dialing. So if any of you are familiar with our Power Dialer product, it's the bias in the Power Dialer product is toward dialing, and it's partly for SDR. It's mostly for SDR teams. And so there, the email is ad hoc with the user. So anytime someone's dialing with the Power Dialer in the Salesforce or in the LMP product, they can send an email whenever they want, and they have access to email templates. In the Playbooks product, which is designed as well to be flexible enough for AEs or those who are working accounts, emails can be programmed as part of the cadence. So for instance, you might have a cadence that says, hey, let me dial on day one, let me also email on day one, and those emails are pre-programmed, so when the time comes up, the rep can review, personalize, and send. And again, both those products will combine both. Power Dialer is going to be a little more ad hoc with email, and Playbooks is going to be more built into the cadences that you use as a sales rep using the Playbooks product. I think that's it for questions. Again, my email is thomas.hamer@insidesales.com. Please feel free to email me with any questions, and hit me up on Twitter if you can't find my email. And thank you so much for attending the webinar, and I hope that this was valuable, and I hope I'll hear from you all in the future. Thanks.